The morning at the international airport was buzzing with the usual noise. The soft hum of conversations, the rustling of luggage, and the overhead announcements echoing throughout the terminal. Travelers from all corners of the world hurried through security checks, some weary from long flights, others eager to get to their destinations. Among them, Officer Martinez and his loyal police dog, Rex, moved through the crowd like a well-oiled machine. It was their routine to patrol the baggage claim area, sniffing out anything that could pose a threat to the safety of the airport. Rex, a seasoned German shepherd with sharp instincts and a calm demeanor, was used to the sights and sounds of the airport. He had been part of the K9 unit for years, and his nose was finely tuned to detect even the smallest trace of danger. For Martinez, working with Rex was second nature. They were a perfect team. Rex did the sniffing, and Martinez followed his lead. Together, they uncovered drugs, explosives, and various forms of contraband in the past, but today felt different. Something in the air felt strange, though Martinez couldn't put his finger on it. As they approached a section of luggage, Rex's behavior began to change. It was subtle at first, a slight shift in his posture, the way he tilted his head, but it was enough to catch Martinez's attention. The dog's nose twitched and his ears stood upright, a clear sign that something had caught his scent. Martinez gave a subtle nod to a nearby officer to let them know something was up. Rex's focus sharpened, and the dog moved toward a suitcase nestled in a corner near the baggage carousel. The suitcase didn't look unusual. It was a standard black hard-shell case, slightly scuffed from travel, but nothing out of the ordinary. Still, Rex circled the bag, his nose working overtime. His tail wagged slightly, but it was the way he paused in front of the case, sitting down, his gaze fixed firmly on the bag, that raised Martinez's suspicion. This was no casual sniff. Rex had found something. Martinez knelt to examine the suitcase more closely. The dog's behavior was far too deliberate to ignore. Officers on standby stood at attention, their eyes darting nervously from Rex to the bag. The terminal was still busy, with travelers rushing past, unaware of what was unfolding just a few feet away. Martinez reached for the suitcase, but before he could grab it, he noticed something strange. The bag seemed to be slightly heavier than expected. That was unusual for something that looked so ordinary. His instincts kicked in, and without hesitation, Martinez motioned for the security team to assist him. "Check this one out," he said, his voice calm but firm. The officers around him tightened their grip on their radios, ready to call in backup if needed. Rex, sensing the urgency, stayed seated, watching his handler with intensity, waiting for the next move. A moment of silence passed, then the air seemed to thicken with anticipation. Martinez gently lifted the suitcase and began the process of checking it for any irregularities. His heart rate quickened ever so slightly. He had been through this countless times before, but Rex's behavior told him that today might be different. The airport, usually a place of mundane travel, was suddenly filled with an undercurrent of tension. As Martinez carefully set the suitcase down on a nearby table, he couldn't help but wonder, what was it that Rex had smelled? What was hidden inside this unassuming bag? The answers were just out of reach, but the feeling that something was wrong hung heavy in the air. Rex, as always, was the first to know. Officer Martinez carefully placed the suitcase on the table, the weight of the moment heavy in the air. Rex, the highly trained German shepherd, stood by his side, still watching the bag with laser focus. His tail had stopped wagging, and his stance was rigid, alert. It was clear that Rex wasn't just reacting to a typical scent. There was something deeply unsettling about this particular bag. Martinez gave a quick signal to the nearby security officers, his voice low but firm. "Let's open it." He wasn't going to take any chances. Though nothing about the bag screamed danger, Rex's instincts were never wrong. Over the years, Martinez had learned to trust his partner's judgment. If Rex was fixated on this suitcase, it was worth investigating, no matter how harmless it seemed. The officers gathered around, eyes fixed on the suitcase as Martinez unzipped the bag. The sound of the zipper slicing through the air was unusually loud in the otherwise quiet terminal. The bag opened to reveal a neatly packed layer of clothes, all folded with care. At first glance, there didn't seem to be anything unusual, just an ordinary traveler's bag. But Martinez didn't stop there. He knew Rex's behavior wasn't the result of something as simple as a few misplaced items. He began to dig deeper, pulling the clothing aside, his hands working quickly but carefully. The officers crowded closer, standing in tight formation. Everyone was waiting, holding their breath, as Martinez moved through the contents. Beneath the clothes, he found a hidden compartment. It was small and discreet, expertly concealed, but it was there, another sign that something wasn't right. Rex had been fixated on this spot for a reason, and now Martinez's gut was telling him they were about to uncover something much bigger than a simple smuggling attempt. The compartment was sealed with thick plastic, making it almost invisible to the naked eye. It looked like a carefully constructed hiding place meant to evade detection. Martinez's fingers brushed the edge of the plastic, feeling the cold, hard surface underneath. It was wrapped tightly, as though trying to contain whatever was inside. His heart rate quickened, but he didn't hesitate. He motioned for the officers to step back, giving him space to investigate further. With a swift movement, Martinez peeled away the wrapping. What he found inside sent a cold shiver down his spine. There were several bags, each filled with a white, powdery substance. The bags were wrapped in silver foil, the kind used to conceal items in a way that made them difficult to detect by scanners. The powder inside glimmered under the harsh fluorescent lights of the airport. Martinez's mind raced. What was this? Drugs? Chemicals? Something worse? Rex growled low in his throat, his eyes still locked on the contents of the compartment. The dog's reaction was instinctive, a silent warning that this wasn't just any contraband. This was something serious. The other officers exchanged uneasy glances, the tension in the air now palpable. No one dared to speak as Martinez carefully examined the bags. It didn't take long for him to realize that this wasn't a simple case of illegal substances. This was something far more dangerous. Martinez didn't waste any time. He grabbed his radio, his voice steady but urgent. "We need the bomb squad and customs agents now," he said, his words clipped and quick. He wasn't sure what he had uncovered yet, but he knew it was beyond the scope of normal airport security. Whatever was inside these bags had the potential to cause a lot of harm if it fell into the wrong hands. As the team waited for the bomb squad to arrive, the weight of the discovery began to settle in. Rex, ever watchful, continued to sit by the table, his sharp eyes never leaving the bags. Martinez couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Whatever they were about to uncover was just the tip of the iceberg, and it was something far more terrifying than he could have imagined. The air around the table felt thick with anticipation. Martinez stood frozen, his gaze locked on the silver foil-wrapped bags that sat ominously before him. He could hear the quiet murmurs of the officers standing nearby, each one clearly wondering what they had just discovered. Rex's growl had subsided, but his stance remained tense, his alert eyes never leaving the suspicious bags. The dog knew something dangerous was hidden there, and Martinez had no intention of waiting too long to find out what it was. Moments passed like hours as they waited for the bomb squad to arrive. Each officer moved with the efficiency of those trained to handle crises, but no one spoke. The sounds of the terminal outside, the laughter of children, the low hum of flight announcements seemed distant, as though they were on another plane of existence. Here, in the small corner of the airport, everything had changed. The mundane had turned into something far more sinister. Martinez's mind raced. What was inside those foil-wrapped bags? The powder looked harmless at first glance, but Martinez knew better than to trust appearances. He had seen enough to know that substances like this could be deadly in the wrong hands. Drugs? Explosives? There was no way to tell without further investigation, and the bomb squad's expertise was urgently needed. His radio crackled, breaking his thoughts. "We're on our way, Officer Martinez," came the voice of the bomb squad leader. Martinez exhaled, relieved that help was finally on the way. But a new tension gripped him. They were about to uncover something that could change everything. As if on cue, the bomb squad arrived, a team of experts dressed in full protective gear. Their calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the growing unease in the room. Martinez quickly briefed them on the situation, explaining how Rex had been the one to alert them to the suspicious suitcase and how they had discovered the sealed compartment with the strange powder. The bomb squad leader, a seasoned expert named Captain Harris, knelt down beside the suitcase and took a moment to assess the situation. Harris ran his gloved hands carefully over the foil-wrapped bags, checking for any signs of instability or unusual markings. The atmosphere in the room was taut as everyone waited for his verdict. The minutes stretched, each one feeling heavier than the last. "This is no ordinary find," Harris finally said, his voice steady but filled with the weight of the situation. He lifted one of the bags, shaking it slightly to gauge its contents. "We're dealing with something far more serious here than just smuggled drugs or explosives." Martinez's stomach tightened. What could be more serious than drugs or explosives? He could feel his palms sweating as he waited for Harris to explain further. The bomb squad leader turned to his team. "We'll need to get this analyzed immediately," he said. "The substance inside these bags could be a chemical compound we haven't encountered before. It may be highly volatile, or it could be part of a larger, more insidious plan." The words hung in the air like a thick fog. A part of Martinez was relieved that they were taking the right precautions, but another part of him was now deeply uneasy. This wasn't just a case of illegal contraband. It felt like something far worse. His mind flashed to the worst-case scenarios: a chemical weapon, an act of terrorism, or some other horrifying plot that had found its way into the heart of the airport. He couldn't shake the feeling that they had only scratched the surface. As the bomb squad moved quickly to secure the bags and prepare for further testing, Martinez's gaze fell back to Rex. The dog remained still, his focus unwavering. It was as if Rex already knew the gravity of the situation. Martinez nodded at his partner, grateful for the dog's sharp instincts. Without Rex, they might never have caught on to the danger lurking in that innocuous suitcase. The next steps were clear. They needed to find out what this chemical compound was, who it belonged to, and how it had made its way past security. But deep down, Martinez had a sinking feeling. This was no ordinary bust. They were about to uncover something that could shake the very foundation of the airport and the world beyond it. The bomb squad worked quickly, but carefully. Captain Harris and his team moved with practiced precision, their experience guiding them through the tense moment. Martinez stood to the side, watching closely but feeling a rising sense of dread. Every move felt like it held the potential to trigger a disaster. The airport, normally bustling with the noise of travelers, now seemed eerily quiet, everyone holding their breath, waiting for the next turn in the story. Harris gave a sharp nod to his team, signaling them to open the bags. With delicate hands, the bomb squad began to cut through the foil wrapping. The room was deathly silent, save for the faint sound of scissors slicing through the silver material. One by one, the bags were carefully unsealed. As the contents were revealed, Martinez's heart skipped a beat. Inside the bags was a fine white powder, its texture smooth and crystalline. At first glance, it seemed harmless, nothing like the typical substances Martinez had encountered before. But something in the way the powder gleamed under the bright lights of the airport made his skin crawl. It didn't look like any drug he'd seen before. His mind flashed back to the bomb squad's earlier comments. Could be volatile, could be part of a larger plan. Captain Harris took a sample from one of the bags and sealed it in a small plastic container. He glanced over at Martinez. "We need to get this analyzed." "Immediately," he said, his voice grim. The urgency in his tone sent a shiver down Martinez's spine. The room felt colder, as if the walls were closing in around them. The familiar sound of distant flight announcements now felt out of place, a stark contrast to the tension mounting in the security room. Before they could act further, the bomb squad's lead chemist, Dr. Emily Grant, stepped forward. She was an expert in hazardous substances, and her calm presence was a small comfort in the face of the unknown. "We need to run this through the lab," Dr. Grant said, her voice steady but edged with concern. "But I've seen similar compounds before. If I'm right, this could be something far more dangerous than we first imagined." The realization hit Martinez like a punch to the gut. The powder wasn't just a typical drug or a basic explosive. It was something more insidious. Dr. Grant was suggesting that it could be part of a chemical weapon, or worse, a substance capable of mass harm if released in public spaces. His thoughts raced as the full weight of the situation settled in. This was no longer just a routine airport bust. They were on the verge of uncovering something far more terrifying. As the bomb squad continued their work, Martinez's phone rang, snapping him out of his daze. He answered quickly, his voice tight. "Martinez here." It was the head of airport security, speaking with urgency. "Officer, we've traced the suitcase back to a passenger who just boarded a flight. We need to locate this person immediately." Martinez felt his pulse quicken. The situation had just escalated. The suspect had already passed through security, and now they were racing against time to stop whatever plot was unfolding. "Give me the details," Martinez responded quickly. Feeling a surge of adrenaline flood his body. The airport security team sent over the information. The passenger had been acting suspiciously from the moment they entered the terminal, avoiding direct eye contact with staff and making quick, erratic movements. The suitcase was registered in their name, but now the passenger was already en route to another destination. They had just boarded a flight bound for an international location. "Prepare to intercept," Martinez said to the security team on the phone. "We need to stop that plane before it leaves the country." As he hung up, Martinez's eyes met Rex again. The dog remained calm, but there was a certain knowing in his gaze. It was as if Rex understood that this wasn't over, that they had only uncovered the beginning of something much larger. With every passing second, the tension grew. The flight was still in the air, and they had only a short window of time to act. Martinez's stomach churned as he thought about what would happen if they failed. This was bigger than just stopping a single criminal. It was about preventing a potential disaster. As the seconds ticked by, Martinez's mind raced. The situation was becoming more complex with each passing moment. The passenger with the suspicious suitcase was already airborne, heading to an unknown location, and the contents of that suitcase, now confirmed to be a potentially dangerous chemical compound, were still a mystery. The feeling of urgency was palpable, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Martinez, however, couldn't afford to let panic take over. He had done this for years, and his instincts told him that if they didn't act quickly, they might be too late. He turned to the bomb squad, who were already coordinating with customs and other law enforcement agencies. "We need to figure out exactly what we're dealing with," he said. "The quicker we can identify the chemical, the better our chances of stopping this." Dr. Emily Grant, the bomb squad's chemist, had already sent the samples to the lab for analysis, but the results would take time. She was working tirelessly, but even she knew that the clock was ticking. They couldn't wait for a full analysis. They needed actionable intelligence now. As Martinez turned away to gather more details from the airport's security footage, his phone buzzed. It was a message from the security team who had been tracking the suspect's movements. They had just pulled up the surveillance footage of the individual in question. The passenger, identified as a man in his mid-30s, had indeed acted suspiciously. He had arrived at the airport under a false identity and seemed to be trying to avoid attention, but security footage showed him being caught on camera multiple times near the luggage area. "His behavior matches exactly what we've seen with smugglers," the security officer on the phone reported. He was nervous, but more importantly, he made a call while walking through the terminal. It looked like he was giving instructions. Martinez felt a chill crawl up his spine. A man smuggling dangerous substances was one thing, but giving instructions over the phone, that suggested coordination with someone else, someone who might be pulling the strings. His thoughts were interrupted by another incoming call, this time from the Air Traffic Control Center. They had been able to trace the flight the suspect had boarded, and they were tracking its position. The flight was scheduled to land at an international airport in a few hours, but it wasn't just any destination. It was a high-risk location, known for being a hotbed of illicit activity and trafficking networks. This was no coincidence. Martinez immediately ordered the flight to be intercepted, coordinating with international law enforcement to ensure that once the plane landed, the authorities would be ready. The gravity of the situation was finally hitting him. This wasn't just about a suitcase of drugs or explosives. This was part of a much larger operation, a global network that had just expanded its reach into the heart of the airport. Whoever was behind this was playing a dangerous game, and Martinez wasn't sure how many pieces there were left to uncover. Meanwhile, Rex remained by Martinez's side, calm but alert. The dog's earlier intuition had proven to be more than just a hunch. Rex had led them to a discovery that could have saved countless lives. But now, Martinez couldn't help but wonder, was this just one small piece of a much larger puzzle? The powder, the suspicious passenger, the phone call, it all pointed to something bigger than they could have imagined. As the team prepared for the interception, Martinez looked down at Rex, whose keen eyes seemed to say, "We're not done yet." Martinez nodded. They were in this together, and together, they would stop whatever disaster was unfolding, piece by piece. The tension was palpable as the clock continued to tick. The final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but the full picture was still out of reach. What would they find when the suspect's flight landed? Would they be able to stop whatever was coming next? Or was it already too late? The air in the security room was thick with anticipation. Officer Martinez stood by the window, watching the runway through the glass, his mind churning with possibilities. Every second felt like an eternity, and every passing moment brought them closer to the unknown. His thoughts raced as he paced back and forth, trying to keep his nerves in check. The suspect's flight was now approaching its destination, an international airport known for being a hub of illicit activity. If they didn't intercept it soon, the threat would be out of their hands. Captain Harris of the bomb squad was working in tandem with the airport's security team and international law enforcement, coordinating the operation from the ground. The tension was palpable, each person aware of the stakes. They were on the brink of preventing something catastrophic, but the unknowns loomed like shadows in the back of their minds. The situation was delicate. Any misstep could result in disaster. Martinez's phone buzzed again. This time, it was an update from air traffic control. The suspect's flight had begun its descent into the high-risk airport. It was minutes away from landing. Martinez felt his stomach tighten. He quickly grabbed the phone, his voice low but urgent. "Any word from the ground?" he asked. "We're prepared," the voice on the other end said. "The local authorities are in position, and we've already informed customs. The moment that plane touches down, they'll be waiting for the suspect." Martinez nodded, his eyes still fixed on the runway. He could almost feel the weight of the situation pressing down on you. This wasn't just about stopping a criminal. This was about preventing something far larger and more dangerous from unfolding. Suddenly, the silence in the room was broken by a soft growl from Rex. The dog had been standing quietly beside Martinez, but now his posture had shifted. His ears were up, and his sharp eyes scanned the room as if sensing something the humans hadn't noticed. Martinez knelt down to Rex's level, placing a hand on the dog's back. Rex's behavior wasn't the result of random anxiety. There was something else at play. Something Rex was picking up on. "What is it, boy?" Martinez murmured. Rex's tail remained still, and the dog's gaze never wavered. It was clear he was alert, but Martinez couldn't quite put his finger on what had triggered Rex's unease. There was still so much they didn't know about the powder in the suitcase and the suspect's connection to this international network. Was there more to this than just the individual they were about to catch? The radio crackled to life again, pulling Martinez from his thoughts. It was the bomb squad. "Officer Martinez, we've just received the results from the lab," Captain Harris said, his voice grim. "The substance inside those bags, it's not just a chemical compound. It's a highly unstable synthetic toxin." The words hit Martinez like a punch to the gut. He had suspected something serious, but hearing the confirmation of a synthetic toxin, a substance capable of causing mass casualties, was a stark reminder of just how high the stakes were. This wasn't just an illegal smuggling operation. This was a bioterrorism plot in the making. The bomb squad continued. "We've cross-referenced it with known terrorist networks. This toxin matches the profiles of chemicals linked to several high-profile attacks." Martinez's breath caught in his throat. The situation was spiraling into something far darker than he had imagined. He felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. The suspect, the suitcase, the powder, it was all connected to a terrifying plan. They had to stop it before it was too late. "We need to move now," Martinez said, his voice firm and commanding. "If the suspect is trying to deploy this toxin, we have to prevent it from reaching its destination." As the final moments before the plane's landing ticked away, the tension in the room became almost unbearable. Martinez's mind was racing, but there was one thing he knew for certain. They had to intercept the suspect before he could unleash the toxin on an unsuspecting public. Every second counted. The countdown was on. Officer Martinez stood by the window, his eyes locked on the clock as the final minutes ticked away. Every second felt like an eternity, but there was no turning back now. The flight was just moments away from landing, and every law enforcement officer on the ground was ready to spring into action. Martinez's grip tightened on the edge of the table as he glanced at the other officers in the room. Their faces were a mix of determination and anxiety, but no one was backing down. They were in this together, and they were going to stop whatever was coming next. On the other side of the room, Rex stood silently, his keen eyes fixed on the door. The dog hadn't moved from his post since the operation began, and Martinez knew Rex could sense the heightened tension. They both knew how much was riding on this moment. Suddenly, the radio crackled again. "Officer Martinez, we have confirmation. The plane has landed. The suspect has deplaned and is on his way through customs. Local authorities have already engaged." Martinez's heart raced. This was it. The suspect was mere steps away from disappearing into a crowd, or worse, finding a way to deploy the toxin. The officers in the room sprang into motion, coordinating their efforts to make sure the suspect couldn't escape. Every exit was being monitored, and customs agents were prepared for the interception. "Everyone stay sharp," Martinez said, his voice low but intense. "We need to keep him contained until we know the full extent of the threat." Just as Martinez finished speaking, another message came over the radio. "He's been spotted at the customs checkpoint. Moving through security now. We're making our way toward him." Rex's ears pricked up and his tail remained still, as though he knew the suspect was closing in. Martinez felt a surge of adrenaline. He gave Rex a quick nod. "Let's go, boy." The team moved quickly, following the orders being relayed from the airport's security team and customs. The suspect was trying to blend in, but his behavior was still suspicious. He kept looking over his shoulder, and his pace was uneven. He was nervous, and for good reason. As he moved through the crowded terminal, the authorities closed in. "We have eyes on him," came the voice over the radio. "He's trying to head for the exit. We're in position." Martinez's pulse quickened. This was the moment. If they didn't catch him now, he could disappear with the toxin, and the consequences would be unimaginable. They had no idea how large the operation was or what else the suspect might be planning. The suspect reached the exit and glanced around nervously. He was almost there, but just as he reached for the door, a series of officers emerged from the crowd, blocking his path. The suspect froze, his eyes widening in shock. He tried to turn, but it was too late. The authorities had him cornered. Martinez stepped forward, his gaze never leaving the suspect. The man's eyes darted around in panic, but he didn't make a move. He knew he was trapped. It was over. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," Martinez said, his voice firm. "You're not going anywhere." The suspect glared at him, but his shoulders sagged. He knew the game was up. In the distance, the bomb squad team arrived, and Dr. Emily Grant was already preparing to examine the suspect's belongings. But first, they needed to secure the area and ensure there were no surprises. "Get him out of here," Martinez ordered, "and make sure we take everything he's carrying. We need to know exactly what we're dealing with." As the suspect was led away in handcuffs, Martinez's thoughts were still racing. They had caught the man, but the real question remained. How deep did this operation run? Was this one lone agent, or was there an entire network waiting to strike? Martinez's gut told him they had only just scratched the surface. But for now, the immediate danger had been averted. Rex stood by Martinez's side, his calm demeanor betraying the high-stakes tension of the past hour. It was clear to Martinez that they had done the right thing, but the bigger battle was far from over. With the suspect now in custody, the immediate danger had been contained. Officers led the man away, his hands cuffed behind his back. The terminal, which had felt like a war zone just minutes before, was now eerily quiet. The tension was still thick in the air, but it was no longer the kind that comes from imminent danger. Now, it was the kind that comes from the aftermath, the quiet realization that something far larger might still be looming on the horizon. Martinez stood by the door, his eyes fixed on the suspect as he was escorted through the terminal. The bomb squad, along with Dr. Emily Grant, were already securing the rest of the suspect's belongings. The toxic substance, the synthetic toxin that had caused so much worry, was safely in the hands of the experts. But Martinez couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. The operation they had just interrupted had the hallmarks of something far bigger than a single, isolated attack. "Where do we go from here?" Martinez asked, his voice quiet but full of uncertainty. Captain Harris, still in full bomb squad gear, approached him. "We've secured the substance, but I agree. This doesn't feel like a one-off operation. There's a bigger picture here, and we're just getting started." Martinez nodded, his mind replaying the events of the last few hours. The phone call, the suspicious suitcase, wrecks of alertness, it had all led them here. But what was the larger plan? Who was behind it? The bomb squad's chemist, Dr. Grant, came over, holding a small container with the sample of the synthetic toxin. "We've started the preliminary analysis, and it's as bad as we feared," she said, her voice calm but grave. "This substance is part of a much larger network. We found traces of it in a few other recent investigations, some related to organized crime, others to international terrorist groups. This isn't the work of a lone actor. This is just a piece of a much bigger operation." Martinez felt his stomach twist. The discovery of the toxin was only the beginning. This was a global web they had just stumbled into, and they had no idea how far its reach extended. The suspect they had apprehended was likely only a small player in a far more complex and dangerous network. And now, with this knowledge, the authorities had a much larger problem to contend with. Just then, Martinez's phone buzzed again. It was the international law enforcement agency they had coordinated with. The report confirmed his worst fear. The suspect wasn't working alone. They had tracked other individuals tied to this network across several countries. The toxin was only one part of a much larger plan, with cells scattered all over the globe. There were more agents out there, still in motion, preparing to strike. "We just opened Pandora's box," Martinez muttered, his heart sinking as the full scale of the operation became clear. Rex, who had been sitting quietly by Martinez's side, raised his head and let out a low whine. The dog's eyes were focused on the airport exit, as if sensing the growing storm. Martinez's gut told him that this was far from over. The world they knew was about to change, and the job ahead of them had just gotten infinitely more dangerous. For now, though, they had won a small victory. The suspect was in custody, and the toxin had been secured. But Martinez knew this was just the beginning. The web of criminals and terrorists they had just uncovered was vast, and it would take everything they had to dismantle it. As the night drew to a close, Martinez looked down at Rex, giving his partner a gentle pat on the head. The dog's keen instincts had been right all along. They had stopped a disaster. But Martinez couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was still to come. The world wasn't done with them yet, and neither was the dangerous network they had only just begun to uncover.